All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We had a little bit of a change of pace. Threat Locker is not able to join us. Well, the sales guy was, but the engineer wasn't. And this group wants to talk to the engineer, not the sales guy. So I mean, honestly, kind of a timely thing. Since the attack on the pipeline, they've been extremely busy, and they haven't had resources to allocate to other things. And interestingly enough, with the events of yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw JBS Meat was attacked as well. It kind of seems timely.
It affected us here in Green Bay. They had to shut down for 2 days, I think. For sure a day. They say they're up and running.
He's in the car.
John, maybe you can mute us if you're in the car.
I'm not in the car.
Sounds like a steamboat.
Huh. Yeah.
I'll mute.
There we go.
Like Mark Twain joined us.
So JBS is actually the largest protein producer in the world. They not only have the beef processing places, but they have Pilgrim and what used to be Golden Plump. So that place in Cold Spring, Minnesota is also impacted by this whole event, I guess.
From what I read, it looks like they're recovering pretty quick then.
Good.
I don't know if they paid the ransom or if they just have great systems in place to.
Hopefully they have great systems in place. I'm not really a fan of paying ransoms because I don't really like creating a market for that stuff. So
Right.
conceptually, I mean, I understand it, but conceptually I don't like it. So that being said, we've asked a special guest to join us, talk about some new technology, Mr. Tony Abfalter. I call him the goalie from Foley, even though he's not from Foley, but it rhymes. I call him the goalie from Foley. Tony is, well, he's not only a customer, he's a friend, and he has some interesting tech. And you put a quarter in Tony about technology and he'll talk for 2 hours. He's got a deep knowledge of stuff, very good things. And I think so for today's session, we're going to talk about Starlink, and we're going to hit it at a high level. And today is kind of the tickler day, because we're gonna do another one that'll be a deep dive into Starlink, and that's for something that I kind of got cooking under the hat, where Tony and I might do a live thing where he and I are together. We'll have our shirts on this time, but maybe. But no, I think we're gonna do we have a neat concept coming up, and we're gonna go with a deep dive with Starlink. I won't steal anyone's thunder, but Tony, do you want to kind of tell them a little bit about who you are? And like what you do, because what you do is pretty cool just in and of itself. I mean, not the felonies, just the misdemeanors. All right.
Just the misdemeanors. No, I'm director of engineering for Leighton Broadcasting. So I take care of the IT and engineering for a bunch of radio stations.
Which is kind of cool.
So everything else.
Tony is exposed to massive amounts of radiation every day. Which is why he has that lead hat behind him. Skin.
There you go.
So yeah, Tony does the broadcast engineering thing. Is kind of cool. An interesting thing if you ever have a chance to talk to a broadcast engineer. They've got some good stories. So Tony, maybe a little bit about like how did you become interested in Starlink? How did you hear about it? What kind of piqued your interest in Starlink? And maybe a little bit a high level of what Starlink is first, so people can understand what it is first. Then talk to a little bit about how you got interested in it. Then we'll do a deeper dive into the Starlink, but kind of maybe give them a summary first.
Sure. So Starlink is an answer to an age-old question of how do we provide broadband to in most cases, rural areas, but a more substantial, robust broadband service that is in keeping with today's technologies and standards. So where it got born out of was the HughesNet, the Iridium satellite data, as far as for items like that, the slower speed data that you would get from geosync satellites and to keep the laws of physics real simple, for the longest time, the way you would get those satellite services are from satellites called geosync satellites, which are a long distance away. Longer the radio signal has to travel, the more latency, and obviously the lower the data rates, along with the competition for those satellites with other services is going to make the cost of the service high. The availability for transponders, the little things that repeat the signals on these satellites, the cost to use them, especially in a 24-hour capacity, is extremely high. So where Starlink got born out of is the necessity to get the speeds increased, lower the latency, get the overall cost down. That's where Elon Musk was kind of the first leader in this. There are some competing services that are at different processes, none that have deployed, none that have actually gotten up in the air. One is a Russian state-sponsored service, like Starlink. Yeah, like Starlink, and then there's of course Amazon's the Blue Origin service that has gotten on the books, planned, has got through FCC, ITU certification and stuff like that to be launched, but has not seen any birds up in the air yet. So basically that's where we're at on that. So it's low orbiting satellites, like little repeaters that cover a smaller footprint, but are able to have a high level of service.
So there were solutions before, but none of them great, right? None of them were real good.
Well, I mean, to put it into our nerd perspective, I mean, the best solutions you would be looking at would be on an extremely good day, about 720K would be, you know, top of the line, best speed, as far as for throughput. And that's like if everything was going perfect.
Right, right. And this is, well, go a little bit about how did you become interested in it, Tony? How did you even hear about this stuff? Because
well, just, I mean, it's just nature of the beast. I mean, I've always played around with satellite stuff. I mean, it's always been kind of an interesting.
Who hasn't?
Yeah, but I mean, it's always been an interesting concept. I mean, you know, it's kind of got a really cool history from the days of Bell Labs, because I mean, that's originally where satellite was developed, was out of the Ma Bell days, which spurred a whole slew of different things. But, you know, one of the cool things that came out of satellites was the accidental discovery of radio astronomy and finding out that signals, galaxies, you know, stars produce radio signals that we could receive, along with the, you know, using like passive satellites, like the large metallic balloons that they used to launch off to bounce signals, going into active satellites like we use now that actively repeat signals and stuff like that. So that's where my interest kind of gained from it. So reading those and keeping up to date with all the publications kind of led me to where, I mean, I was keeping up to date with this stuff. So once it started moving into beta deployment, of course, you know, I got my hands on one as soon as I could. And right now we've got 16 of them successfully deployed in our company, and they're great.
So you're actually physically beta testing this technology, and maybe talk a little bit about how it works and how, you know, at a high level, how you are using them.
Sure. So, I mean, to make it real simple, it's really cool because anybody can install it. It's about the size of a pizza pan. All you need to know is which way's up, which way's down, stick it on there, and it orientates itself. It takes care of all the alignment issues, which would be kind of the worst part of having like a satellite, like, you know, as far as for like HughesNet and stuff like that, is you usually had to have a technician come out with a meter and make sure that you had good signal levels and stuff like that. And they've really solved all these solutions and made it a really good package for everyone. So that's kind of the easy deployment portion of it. So that's where the benefit is on that side. As far as for our deployment and use of it, we're actually using it to replace a lot of our internet connections at a lot of our transmitter sites because of the cost advantage, first of all, the availability, because you're not geo-linked to a location, and the multiple redundant entry points for the satellite system. And the other thing is we've ran it through some pretty harsh testing as far as we've been doing it now, I think for what, 2 years now? I think we've had access to it. So we've ran it through some pretty bad monsoon rainstorms. We've ran it through some extremely heavy long duration snowstorms, and we've not had any issues with it. So, I mean, overall success rate with it has been absolutely insane. So, I mean, that's basically what we're doing is we're basically replacing any of our broadband links. And then at our studio locations that we've put them in, we're using it as a redundant internet connection, which has served us well in St. Cloud one time especially.
Are you comfortable, or can you say anything about the speeds? Now, this isn't an official quote, everybody, this is just anecdotal information, but can you say anything about the speeds that you've seen with it? Or is that?
I mean,
Well, don't give the exact number, but just say maybe faster than this, or maybe just gotta be general. It could be this.
well, it's hard to really compare it because it really, the only thing that's going to go toe to toe with it is true fiber. I mean, really, that's the only thing that's going to go toe to toe with it. I mean, when you're talking DSL cable, notice it as much as you used to. But there's that little kind of drop out and come back in, or that kind of sound of the signal kind of just washing out but coming back in quick. That doesn't happen the way that they've got their back end built, because the infrastructure knows where the next bird's going to be, both in timing and in its catalog, and it knows where to be looking for that. So as one bird's leaving, it's grabbing onto the next best bird for your area and bringing all that data across and everything else. So you don't really, it's not like you see a bump drop out and then come back in. You can continuously download like an ISO image, and you've probably crossed, maybe 2 birds. It depends upon how big of an image you're downloading. But I mean, I think like one of the biggest images that I downloaded was like an 8 gig backup, and it was steady. I mean, it was smooth.
Honestly, that's insane. I mean, I have trouble getting the toilet paper to face the right direction. I change the roll. I can't. This is.
A question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Ken.
they're not geosynced at all?
No, they're low orbiting satellites, low Earth orbiting satellites is what they are. So they're not way out at that 22,000 kilometer. I think that's where geosync is, if I remember right. But yeah, no, you're flying at about 500, 523. It depends. There's been some changes where SpaceX has gotten some conditions to move some of their birds lower to just get a little bit better positioning and stuff like that, and things like that. And they're going to be having, I think, polar coverage here in the next few months. They're going to be positioning their birds for polar coverage, which will be huge for Antarctica and the scientific research stations down there. Because right now they're
That's gotta be
still using really slow data, and this is going to open up their world for scientific research.
Down there, it's like sucking honey through a straw. So,
Yeah, well, yeah, and I mean, position of the Earth where you're at, plus trying to hit those birds on that arc. I mean, that's a feat in its own right as far as satellites go.
So Tony, hopefully this isn't putting you on the spot. It's not. It's nothing crazy, but so talk about a little bit. So okay, so cool stuff, whatever, blah blah blah, faster, blah blah. Why is this kind of a game changer? You and I talked about this a few months ago, and it stayed fresh in my mind. But we'll see. Maybe it's changed in your mind. But why is this a game changer, do you think? And from an internet perspective?
Well, I think because it completely opens the whole world up to using technology that we have and for the future. I mean, literally, you've got access to, damn near fiber speeds. And we, like I said, we're still in the beta program yet. We haven't even gotten into production yet. So who knows if we're going to be seeing, over a gigabit on these as an option. But as far as for the technology and game changing, I mean, this opens up the world. I mean, when you start looking at like the Reddit, I follow the subreddit for Starlink. I mean, all these normal customers, and we're taking the nerd factor out, the geek factor, and bringing it to what does this really affect? And a lot of these customers are just like, we live out in the middle of Saskatchewan. We live out in the middle of the UP. Our fastest service has always been like a HughesNet, or has been really slow DSL or dial-up even in a lot of cases. And now they're able to start FaceTiming and leveraging a lot of these technologies that, I mean, as funny as it sounds, there's a lot of people that don't have access to these technologies. And suddenly, the most rural of the areas are being opened up to these technologies and these services.
Well, I'll be honest, where I'm from in northern Wisconsin, one of the challenges we have is internet speeds. And just this past weekend, holiday weekend, there's so much heavy use on the towers that we couldn't get internet. You could wait and clock and wait, and then you could get internet at 11 o'clock at night till 3 in the morning when nobody's on it. But having something like this is completely different. But one of the things you said that stuck with me is think about the difference in a business when you're not routing through all these ISPs anymore. You're a direct link, and what that means to data transmission. I mean, that's to me, that was a meaningful thing you said, and that is quite a game changer.
Yeah, especially when they get the laser linking to all the birds and stuff, a faster way of transporting that data. I mean, it's going to change the way the world transfers data. I mean, especially if you like understand the fact of undersea cables and stuff. I mean, while we think fiber being, super fast, and it is fast, but you got to remember that there are laws of physics that apply to the transfer of light, outside of a vacuum and stuff like that. And when you start running what they're capable of doing, like these laser links and stuff like that, it's amazing when you start looking at the throughput speeds and how fast data can be transferred, even versus our cables and stuff that we got right now. It makes our undersea cables theoretically look like dial-up. I mean, it really does. It's crazy the technology that's going to be coming out of this and applied. But I mean, it's going to be a changer. And like I said, I mean, it will be cool to see, a lot of people in the world get a fast broadband connection and one of quality, and that's the other part to consider with all this is it's not simply just and I know I sound like a SpaceX kind of, buy our stuff. No, but I mean,
you have a SpaceX logo that we could.
I haven't got a tattoo yet. I haven't got a tattoo yet, but
yeah.
No,
No, look at Smithers. Nice one, Mike.
I should get a dishy tattoo. No, but I mean, one thing to remember with all this deployment is that it's not the fact that it's a high speed connection. There's also the consideration of quality that's also been shown here too, is that the quality of this service is pretty good. I mean, in comparison to some, unnamed other companies, even within our region, that are down every night, or you're waiting for a certain modem to finish its little blinky light sequence because something went down. We found their service to really be super stable, even in beta. So if beta is anything to see, production is going to be even more incredible.
Tony, are you running anything that would be sensitive to loss, like voice over IP? Have you had success with that over this link?
Yep, absolutely. Nope, we've got a couple of our transmitter sites that are running STL audio. I mean, we've got backups to it, but the concept needs to be tried is, where are we with this? Are we actually at a point where, as a broadcast industry, I mean, we use data and it is as necessary as air, because our audio is continuously streaming to it. That may be the way we have to feed a transmitter.
That's what's so interesting. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
I had to step away for a second, so I don't know if anybody made the point, so I apologize if I'm repeating. But part of what I see about this technology is that the North Koreas, the Chinas, the Irans, they're not going to be able to lock their citizens out of the internet. It just crushes the whole Great China Firewall, as they like to call it. And
that's
the amount of information that we'll be seeing behind these repressive regimes will be astonishing.
Yep. Nope. And
that's an interesting point, Ken.
And that's something that's kind of been considered with all this is that if it was actually discussed in the early portions of deploying a system like this, and it was discussed, we have the technology to do it. We're verging on the ability to do it, cost effectively and, make it work. The question is should we be doing it? And it was actually kind of kicked around by a lot of people before, like your Jeff Bezos and your, Elon Musk decided to go ahead and do this. It's been kind of kicked around that it's like, what are the, political fallouts of this? What are the humanitarian fallouts of this? What are the big picture, how is this going to affect humanity? And I think one of the greatest downfalls of the internet and one of the greatest points of the internet is for humans to communicate, across the world. I mean, that's been good in a lot of ways. It's also been horrible in a lot of ways because, there are some things that are bad about it and there's some things that are good about it. But yeah, ultimately at the end, it's more of a hope that, this brings humans a little bit closer, I guess, with this connectivity and allows us to better understand each other, I guess. I mean, I would say that out of anything technology wise and stuff like that, that would be my biggest hope of the technology is where it gives equal access to everyone. And now I know, now I sound like a freedom fighter type person, but
What do you
but
got?
I mean, for a small coffee bean operation, in, who knows, in Brazil, for them to have access to a broadband technology and share, what they do and how they harvest their beans and take pride in their work and be able to share that with the world. I mean, that's something cool that legitimately they probably don't have good access to. They probably have to run into town once every 6 months. And if they can upload a video or two, they can, but this allows them to literally, hell, even live stream.
Yeah,
They
right.
might be able to access that technology, which kind of opens the world, for a little bit better of a place.
We can
So
watch
it's going to be cool.
We can watch Juan Valdez harvest his coffee beans. So I guess, with all that said, Tony, I know you're not a salesman for these guys. I understand that, but I mean, what are we talking about? $700-800 a month for that type of speed?
No, we're talking $99 right now, flat fee. I think it's $590 to buy the equipment, and that's taxes and stuff for my area. And so that's flat out everything.
So by comparison, I'll say that in northern Wisconsin, my mother's paying about $65 a month for, well, up to 2 meg. That's
Yep.
2, which is usually more like 0.7. So that's a pretty attainable price for that much more capability,
Well, and I mean, at one of our locations, I mean, we'll keep it undisclosed, but at one of our locations, we were paying $200 for 80 megs down and 20 megs up
right?
on DSL.
And
Yeah, that's the same price that we've got going here in Stangleville. And it's the same kind of internet that we have right now with TDS. I'm going, a mile away and I'm going from 20 megs up to 5. And of course, I've signed up for Starlink a while back, and Tony's right on with the pricing, at least in our area. But my question is, you mentioned earlier, and we all know this is a worldwide thing, but you said something that they had received permission to put their satellites in different places.
Mhm.
Being that this is a worldwide thing, who is the entity that they get permission from?
Sure. So there's an entity that countries that signed an agreement, and this is across the board. Not all countries comply, and those are usually your standard rogue nations. But there's what's called an ITU, an International Telecommunications Union, that deals with like the satellites, that deals with radio signals and stuff like that. So like case in point, ham radio frequencies, those are coordinated between the different regions, which, to get it a little bit more complicated, but not too deep, is there's, I believe, 3 regions, but they basically, this international group acts as kind of like an international coordination group, so that, a country like Italy could have fair access as like a country of America, or, a country such as, whomever, France, could have equal rights as another country like Spain, as far as for international services, to put up a satellite, to be able to operate. So like with Starlink being as large of a service as it was, it had to meet certain qualifications through the ITU. And that was it going to provide services to, member countries? Was it going to meet their local regulations? Were they going to, be able to meet compliance? For some countries, that's going to be a struggle. For a good chunk of the countries, it's not so much, like, your Canada, your UK, France, Germany, these countries that don't really have censorship laws per se, that, have to have the government peering at everything you're doing. So for those kind of countries and stuff, the coordination was pretty easy. As far as for the local part, because they are a United States business, the coordination is done internationally. All that's agreed upon, where the birds are going to be going, how it's going to be set up and everything. If everybody signs off it, that gets pushed to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which is our national representation for the rest of us in America. And the FCC is the one that technically hands the license out for the satellites, for their uplink, downlink frequencies, license the satellites to be launched and where they're going to be launched and kind of the coordination and stuff like that. And like I said, I'm giving you a very high level view because there's a bunch of other coordination that has to go in with like Space Command, assigning satellites numbers and stuff like that so they can track it. But for our topic of discussion, we're just going to go on that. So that's where they got permission from, is they're changing from what they originally applied to a different thing. And everybody agreed at the FCC that this is something that, okay, this makes sense. It was brought up internationally and say, hey, they want to re-coordinate their satellites for this and this and this. Everybody's going, well, there's nothing there. Sure, why not? And then it goes back to the FCC, and the FCC is the one that actually posts, you've got approval to go ahead and do this for X amount of birds or whatever the original application was put. And then they give the SpaceX permission to go ahead and do that. So you can't really just go and lob stuff up to space and just go, well, I'm going to start communicating with it because, well, in our country, you would get your butt kicked because the FCC would be knocking at your door because you just can't do that, but that's where the permission comes in. So everybody works together to kind of coordinate it. And mostly that's for a safety perspective. So if a country wants to launch a rocket, everybody knows where everybody's at and stuff like that. And I mean, ideally, it's also to inventory space junk. So we're not polluting space because we want to go explore it. We don't want to make it our trash dump.
So I think that, in our future show, we're going to actually do some more detail on it and kind of.
That's why I'm teasing it a little. I don't want to go too in depth, but.
Does anybody else have any questions before we?
Oh yeah, I do. All right, so I tried to sign up for Starlink already, and they said no go in my area.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't let you sign up neither.
Right? I don't know. Maybe it was my name. It could have been. Yeah. So I guess my thing is I mean, when can we? I mean, I'm in probably central Minnesota here, just 30 minutes south of St. Cloud. So they're not available here. I know they're in low orbit, but I'm just wondering how long you think it's going to take until we can actually get a good blanket over the top of us and actually start deving this out.
Yeah, so that's a frustration of everyone. So it unfortunate. Yeah, I know. Very nice. No, unfortunately, you're part of the majority crowd that's frustrated with it, especially when you look at a map like this. I mean, even in my house, it's not available. And that is not due to coverage, believe it or not. That's due to them only turning on certain cells. So as funny as it is, SpaceX has the world broken up into cells, like cell phone sites, that they have activated for beta testing and stuff. And due to, the downlink stations kind of happily going around like the Fargo, Grand Forks, Minnesota area, we kind of got spoiled with a lot more ability to be beta testing than a lot of other places. So it's not really a coverage issue per se. It's more of a activation, and they're trying to gather a better data point on the service as a whole before activating more. Now they are activating more. There have been some, we'll call it some happy shippings ahead of timeline. Like in our area, you're probably in the same boat as me, Mike, that it's fall is what they were probably shooting out for a date, was fall of 21. So there have been a couple people that have already said that their fall of 21 has turned into spring of 21, and they've activated some additional squares. So I think for us though, here being the fun spoiled kids that we are in this area, I think we'll probably see a good chunk of our activations long before anybody else, like your Florida, your Texas and stuff like that. We'll probably go active as a whole a lot earlier. So for us, it's kind of one of those little bit of just sit patient. It will be here, but it'll probably be here quicker than we want it to be.
I noticed one thing, because I kind of went down the path of already purchasing this, and my plan was to maybe use it at my house and then maybe take it with my camper in my camper and take this to other locations. And one actual negative on that is they geofence their satellites. So if you sign up for it at home, you can't use it in your RV 30 miles away.
Yeah, it's kind of a misnomer as far as the geofencing term. They restrict it to your address area, and the geofencing is a good way to put it. There's more to the technology than that. But you can move it outside your area with depreciable data speeds. Now, it used to be, I think it was 15, but now people are moving it out to 50 and still seeing service. So about 50 miles from their house and still seeing their same speeds and stuff like that. So they're easing it up. Really, the only reason why they're restrictive right now is because they want to get test points on those areas. So that's one thing that they kind of did ask in the beta testing agreement is it's not, and it's been known, and you get people that try to push their luck. I mean, hell, I tried pushing my luck to see what I could get, bouncing around, just doing what it is, just kind of see where we're at. But that's one thing that they did ask is that if they're issuing you a beta test, especially early on in the beta test, they're looking to specifically get a data point for that area so that they can get, customers as a whole a better service. So, I mean, that's one thing to remember. Now, with everything being said, we all know that eventually this is going to lead to some sort of a service that you're going to be able to lop around. Is it going to be a mobile data service? Probably not for a good long time, but is it going to be a data service that Mike can pick up from his house and bring it out to the middle of Mille Lacs Lake and throw it on the Ice Castle house? Absolutely. I mean,
something like a cell service.
Yeah,
possibly?
kind of like
handheld?
well, no, you'd still bring Dishy out, but if you've ever seen these things, they're not horrible. I mean, they really aren't. I mean, there's actually a joke I told Keith that we'll save the joke for.
I don't think you can say those kind of jokes on.
No, but there was a joke about how compact it was and me wanting to bring it 10,000 miles, from where I'm at, because I wanted to bring my own damn internet. So I mean, as far as for a service to where you could bring them like an RV, I mean, people drag their damn direct TV dishes, their huge direct TV dish globes, and throw them out and stuff. And we're talking about a device that weighs maybe an 1/18 of that in weight, sits no more than probably about that when it's actually flattened out and in storage mode. And I mean, we're talking the size of a pizza pan. You could throw it in an RV cover. I mean,
when we do our next double secret pirate broadcast, Tony, would we be able to see what one of them looks like? Is there any way we can?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's more dishes. There's more dishes shipping my way.
That'd be awesome. Be able to show people.
We could even set up a demo of showing how it aligns and everything.
That said, we want to convert over into, are there any other questions, first of all?
Actually, I wanted to say something that's interesting, Tony, that this came from Ma Bell, because our grandfather, Robert P. Barrett II, was a big executive at Ma Bell. So it'd be interesting to see if he had, I mean, anything at all to do with this. I don't know how anyone would find that out.
I don't know, the whole satellite stuff.
Maybe get a
gets-
family discount. Maybe tell me what the family discount on that deal.
No, I mean, when you look at like the first beginnings of satellite, I mean, it's cool. They took their long line horn, stuck it, on the side, put it on a table so they could turn it, and then, obviously change the elevation and azimuth. And the shack was literally, looks like an outhouse attached to it, was their original first kind of like testing shack. It's incredible, the beginnings of satellite
I'm
communication.
literally happy when I can start my truck, Tony. What are you talking about, azimuths and?
No, I mean, it's cool. And then once you start getting into, the low temperature receivers and stuff like that, and getting more frequency stable, that came out of the microwave stuff from the long lines. It gets really cool, the technology. And it's amazing that it can, after everything that was pioneered back in these days and stuff, especially if you know the deep history of it. And it is just amazing that we took the technology from what it was to now we literally have the router, everything all in a pizza pan that's literally a couple inches thick. We've got all the RF technology. We've got all the networking technology. We've got all that literally in a saucer that small. It's incredible.